Okay, we start shortly. Uh, a very good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for your participation in our very important event, uh, International on Social Science. And for today, I'm very happy to be a moderator in the sessions. My name is Alfie. I'm from Ecological University and also a researcher at the Tsunami and Disaster Mitigation Research Center of Ecological University. As informed by the committee that we will have 5 presenters that will be delivered the presentation for today. And before we start, I will give some of information on how our sessions will be run. For the first, every presenters will deliver their presentations around 15 until 20 minutes. And we will offer and we will please all of the presenters deliver the presentation, and after that we will open question and answer sessions. So please keep your times for 15 until 20 minutes for each presenters. And for today, as I mentioned that we have 5 topics that will be delivered in our sessions. That the sessions, the first is Anggita Veronica with the title "The Discourses of Climate Refugee and Revealing the Politics of ASEAN Environmental Policies." And the second speakers, the second presenters is Mr. Anton Novenanto. He will deliver presentations with the title New Marginals or Marginals Building Vulnerability and Resiliency in the Age of COVID-19 from Universitas Brawijaya. Ms. Anggita Veronica is from Faculty of Law, Universitas Gadjah Mada. Sorry, miss that information. And the third speakers is Mr. Ali Yansa Abdurrahim from Indonesian Institute of Sciences, LIPI, that will deliver a presentation with title, The Role of Social Capital in Maintaining Resilience of Farmer, Livelihood Phase Flood and Drought. And then we will please also Ms. Akida Nuril Salma that will deliver presentations with the title, Does Climate Change Matter? Analyzing Climate Change Controversy on the Web and Social Media. And the last presenters, but this is a video, Ms. Titin Antin from Department of Communication Studies of UIN, Sultan Syarif Qasim Riau, with the title, The Responses of Social System in the Voice Management of Indonesia, a Study of Cybernetic Theory. So due to we have very limited times, I would like to please the first presenters is Mbak Anggita Veronica, that 15 until 20 minutes for Mbak Anggita to deliver her presentation. So please host share the presentations, or maybe Mbak Anggita, please Mbak Anggita, time is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Alfie, as our moderator. So I would like to share my screen. Okay, can anyone see my screen clearly?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Under this ecological disaster and climate change topic, our research paper is under the title of The Discourse of Climate Refugee, Unraveling the Politics of ASEAN's Environmental Policies. I am Anggita Veronica Martin from Department of International Relations, Faculty of Social and Political Science, Universitas Gadjah Mada as the author, and with my co-author, Luis Budiman from Department of International Relations, Faculty of Social and Political Science, Universitas Gadjah Mada. This is the overview for our presentation. So we will divide it to be 5 parts. The first part is introduction. We will touch upon climate refugee debate, vulnerabilities of Southeast Asian cities, and role of ASEAN. The second one is the literature review. We will touch upon this issue from 3 approaches. The first one is human rights and then security, and finally post-structuralist approach, which is the discourse analysis that we use for this paper. The third one is the research method, which is the qualitative research. And number 4, we will elaborate further about the results on the under-discussed climate migration issue in ASEAN. And number 5 is we will close this presentation with a conclusion. So the first one, we will introduce to this paper on why is this topic important. So about climate change and migration, there are some data that we put here. It's the environmentally induced migration caused 18.8 million people in the world to be displaced in 2017, and around 143 million of internal climate migrants worldwide by 2050. While Philippines, Myanmar, and Thailand and Vietnam are among the world's 10 countries most affected by climate change. Not only that, there is a 4.8 Celsius temperature rise and a 70 centimeter sea level rise by 2100 for Indonesia, the Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. Well, there is a varied in data and there is a politically contested and debated definition on environmental refugee or the climate refugee that we will use interchangeably here. We use the definition from Myers in 1995, which is environmental refugees are defined as persons who can no longer gain a secure livelihood in their traditional homeland because of environmental factors of unusual scope, notably drought, desertification, deforestation, soil erosion, and water shortages, also natural disasters such as cyclones, storm surges, and floods. Well, climate change has disrupted many aspects of human life, including migration. Changing and extreme climatic conditions such as sea level rise, floods, and droughts are the causes of environmentally induced migration. So here, as a guide towards our research paper, we use the research question of why is the issue of climate refugee in Southeast Asia still under discussed, primarily in the regional body of ASEAN. While this paper acknowledges that the so-called climate refugee term has been politically contested and debated, so we used Myers' definition, and also we acknowledge that there are still conceptual difficulties in defining that, but the fact that there is no international consensus on the definition of climate refugee, even the United Nations does not define climate refugee as a legal type of refugee, further perpetuated this issue, thus asking us to truly dive into this topic to be brought up into ASEAN regional body. The stance of this paper is positioned on the analysis of climate refugees contextualization within ASEAN policymaking and on the promotion of the importance of a stronger regional framework in ASEAN. This paper found that the issue of climate change and migration is still under discussed within the agenda of ASEAN policymaking. Highlighting this phenomenon, this paper believes, as much as other normative studies do, that ASEAN needs to be pushed to take further action in order to prevent future conflicts or crises, as well as to gain potential benefits within the state relations of ASEAN. We use the literature review on 3 approaches. The first one is human rights from the writing of O'Neill and Jeswell and Jolly. This is the perspective that prioritizes human rights in believing to be how this issue should be approached. Jaswal and Jolie argue that the issue of climate refugee is not only rooted in environmental issue, but emerged deeply from the issue of human rights, where the poor citizens in developing countries could be disproportionately affected. They also collided with international law that this non-existence of clear legal instruments for climate refugee mitigation prolongs the issue to be receiving little attention. The second one is the security approach from Hartman, securitization from and for whom. This we see in the politicization of the aspect of climate refugee. By analyzing it through the US national policy, Hartman found it harmful if climate refugee keeps being painted in a neo-Malthusian way, where they become a security threat that needs to be solved through military operation. That is from traditional security approach, and the human security approach actually intertwined with human rights approach. While the one that we use in our paper is the discourse analysis coming from post-structuralist approach. This is the environmentality from Agrawal that is rooted in Foucauldian governmentality. This originated from Foucault's work on governmentality in cementing the technology and power knowledge for state and social control coming from governing. The emergence of subjects then become internalized, created into regulation under the system, and circulated as a discourse that constituted as a knowledge. And Agrawal, following Foucault's view, deepened the post-structuralist approach by highlighting environmentality through understanding how environmental politics could emerge with characteristics that are affected by, as I quote here, transformation in knowledge, politics, institution, and subjectivities. Therefore, using qualitative research as our research method and emphasizing on the why, question of why in the causal analysis, we use the secondary data from literature reviews, from surveys of others, and also case study method on Jakarta City. Therefore, by utilizing a qualitative research method, this research has found several key findings in answering the aforementioned research question. First is the institutional weaknesses, such as the bureaucracy of ASEAN, hinders the process of creating climate migration as a discourse subject. Second, existing ASEAN framework working groups and cooperation too often focus only on urgent matters such as haze or forest fire without giving much room to introduce, arrange, and establish in-depth discussion for possible environmental threats such as climate refugee. Third, there is a comparatively weak commitment to refugee protection and little contribution to climate mitigation by ASEAN members. And fourth, it is the political constraint at the international level in the making of consensus on the conceptual definition of climate refugee sustain such lag in the decision-making process regarding climate refugee. We will elaborate further within our results points. In the case of ASEAN, it should be noted that the tendency of climate refugee being under discussed here stems from the bureaucracy, politics, and identity in its governmentality and environmentality. Breaking down Agrawal's environmentality concepts on the issue of climate refugee in Southeast Asia, ASEAN has power knowledge as a regional institution that governs environmental regulation in its body and frameworks, and it comprises subjectivity that comes from the representatives of member states to ASEAN politics, thus incorporating to the production of environmental identities that ASEAN upholds. The slow process of creating climate refugee as a discourse in Southeast Asia region is analyzed through the lacking existence of efforts in making the aforementioned issue of climate refugee as a subject within ASEAN's policies, ideas, and actions. On the issue of climate change, ASEAN has been criticized due to several factors, such as its members' little contribution in reducing greenhouse gas emission and its members' reluctance in committing to the international law of refugee protection, only two countries who ratified the 1951 Refugee Convention. Bringing this issue in advance is needed. Why? Before ASEAN member states experience noticeable loss of its sovereign land, resources, and primarily its citizens' lives due to climate change that would increase the number of climate refugees. ASEAN's existing governmentalization of its government is found to be too limited to the production of knowledge based on major urge and acceptance by its representatives on deciding which issues remain a priority. The perplexity of arranging environmental priorities within this institution is too often affected by the severity of repeated environment issue cases. On the matter of haze or forest fire in general, the severity of the problem becomes iterated and pushed annually to truly tackle the problem by creating coherent frameworks. The environmental identity of facing haze as a problem has been pushed as a discourse in its body, for example, by the existence of ASEAN Haze Agreement on Transboundary Air Pollution. However, the reluctance to underline some others' environmental issues is shown in its frameworks and policymaking. To some extent, ASEAN has shown its progress in devoting its effort towards more progressive environmental identities, such as through ASEAN Haze Agreement on Transboundary Air Pollution, ASEAN Program on Sustainable Management of Peatland Ecosystem, and the ASEAN Declaration on Heritage Parks. However, its achievement is limited to a few topics, and the topic of climate refugees still has not received its spotlight compared to the others. This links back to a study conducted by Elder and Miyazawa that finds that ASEAN still faces challenges such as bureaucratic and fragmented organizational structure that result in slow decision-making process. An environmental cooperation in the ASEAN Socio-Cultural Community Blueprint is written in point D10 for climate change, and the ASEAN Working Group on Climate Change has been established as well under the ASEAN Environment Ministers Meeting formulation. However, the issue of climate refugee has not been brought yet. ASEAN's technology, such as from the environmentality, to regulate and form the environment identity of the region needs to be considering this issue to break a pattern of business as usual within ASEAN policies in handling regional crisis. Not only that, the unclear conceptualization of climate refugee by international governance, such as the United Nations and other international legal instruments also perpetuated the inactiveness of ASEAN to use its power for producing such knowledge as a discourse. We used the case study of Jakarta City conducted by Nur Lambang in 2012 as a case that provides an exemplary model on the relationship between the concept of governmentality and environmentality. Well, Jakarta is predicted to have many displacement areas, especially in northern part of Jakarta due to rising sea level. This is the focal issue that needs to be tackled by ASEAN in seeing the data. Governmental instruments on environmental and spatial management do exist, but such measurement has not been understood comprehensively among the local policymakers. Well, in relation with Foucault's governmentality concept, this case study of Jakarta, this phenomenon has undermined the significant role of the local governments in executing environmental policies and informing alarming environmental issues to the public. Thus, it resulted in the insufficient knowledge of the local people of the relationship between climate change and migration. As an exemplary model for ASEAN, flood disasters in Jakarta show that comprehensive governance is crucial in protecting human security, realizing human rights to the environmentally vulnerable population, and preventing significant impacts from climate disaster. The prospects and challenges for ASEAN climate refugee policies on why ASEAN as a regional body needs to put this issue into the regional framework is because it has some prospects and challenges to overcome. The first prospect would be improvement of interstate relations in ASEAN on economic, political, and social aspect for sure. And then the second one is the creation of climate refugee agenda by implementing regional framework and leadership that promote humanitarian assistance, the rights of the migrants, climate change cooperation, and international security, such as cited by Cohen alike. For the challenges, ASEAN needs to overcome two challenges, such as to further overcome its politicization of which issues remain important, such as the climate refugee needs to be prioritized more in the future compared to the other issue that has been getting the spotlight, such as the haze or forest fire in general. ASEAN member states are still dependent on fossil fuel. This also further perpetuated the prolonged issue to not be overcome by ASEAN because we as the member states are still dependent on fossil fuel, and this relates to the governmentality aspects of agrawal rooted from Foucauldian. Well, this paper provides a stepping point for further research who could emphasize on the institutional role of ASEAN as a regional body in handling climate migration as a regional issue which cannot be dealt with by countries individually. That is all from our paper. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Anggita Veronica. Very good presentation and also very good in keeping times. And now we will go to the second presenters, Mr. Anton Novenanto, that will be deliver the title with the marginals building vulnerability and resilience in the age of COVID-19 in Indonesia. So, Mr. Anton, time is yours. Sorry, I would like to remind all the participants, if you have questions for each presenters, we will open at the end of presenters time. You can type in the chat.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear my voice?
Yeah.
We could. Yes, it's clear now, the voice?
Yes, clear.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm changing the slide of our title in a research association named Economica. So this is our research as our response to the situation of COVID-19 pandemic, but we are focusing only in Indonesia. So the background of our research is like we view COVID-19 pandemic has triggered a multidimensional disaster. So COVID is not the disaster. COVID-19 pandemics, it's the trigger. This is why we would like to argue on our paper. So this is the COVID is not the disaster, but it caused a multidimensional disaster. So in every disaster, we will find victims and those claiming themselves as heroes, as you know. In fact, in this particular event now, everyone is a survivor in this ongoing pandemic. So nobody is a victim, nobody is a hero. Everyone is now, we are survivors of this pandemic. So our project was entitled New Marginals, Old Marginals in the Age of COVID-19, focused more on the production, reproduction, and accumulation of vulnerability in the course of COVID-19 pandemic. So we try to focus on vulnerability, how vulnerability is being produced, being reproduced, and being accumulated in the course of COVID-19 pandemic. So we begin with two research questions. The first one is, in which way are pre-existing marginal groups vulnerable prior to, in the course of, and the aftermath of the pandemic in Indonesia in particular? And the second research question is, to what extent has the pandemic politics in Indonesia become a new structure of vulnerability for pre-existing marginal groups and creating new ones? So we are trying to understand that marginality is already existing before the pandemic, and these marginal groups are becoming more vulnerable. But on the other hand, simultaneously, the pandemic creating new marginal groups. So we use the framework from vulnerability theory developed in the field of disaster studies. I will explain a little bit about the vulnerable theory. So the vulnerability theory divided hazard, vulnerability, and disaster. So hazard is forces, conditions, and technologies that carry a potential for social, infrastructural, and environmental damages. This is from the Oliver Smith and Susanna Hoffman, social anthropologists from America. And vulnerability, we define it as the degree of human disability to adjust to sudden, unexpected cultural and material environmental hazards. The production, distribution, and sustaining on reproduction of vulnerability in a society is cultural, social, and political. So we see that hazard is more physical, and vulnerability is more social, or in the system, or in our system as a society. in the cultural system and also in political system. And disaster then is defined as a process event combining a potential destructive agent and or force from the natural, modified or built environment and a population in a socially and economically produced condition of vulnerability, resulting in perceived disruption of the customary relative satisfaction of individual and social needs for physical survival, social order, and meaning. So disaster is combination between environmental and also the social. So this is how this we perceive disaster in our research. And for the methodology, we are adopting a new approach proposed by a consortium of research also named patchwork ethnography. So it's like a from Gunnell, Pharma, and Watanabe. This is very new because this is an experimental methodology also because these three anthropologists, they try to develop a new kind of ethnography that can be used in the situation of working at home. So they define patchy ethnography as ethnographic processes and protocol designed around short-term visits using fragmentary yet rigorous data and other innovations that maintains the long-term commitments, language proficiency, contextual knowledge, and slow thinking that characterize so-called traditional fieldwork, while fully attending to how changing living and working conditions are profoundly and irrevocably changing knowledge production. So we are still, classic ethnography tend to put ethnographers to stay in a long period of time, but with patchy ethnography, we don't have to stay in long term, but in physically, but mentally, yes. Well, so this is the idea of patchy ethnography. So we are doing a patchy field work also. So with the 12 field workers from Mataram, Denpasar, Banjarmasin, Pamekasan, Malang, Surabaya, Jombang, Yogyakarta, Jakarta, Tangerang, Bandar Lampung, we try to do a conventional face-to-face observations and interviews to get primary data. So we use our daily life as our primary data. And also, we also use phone calls, text messages, application, and social media to develop the context. So we try to maintain our long-term commitments with our respondent informant with this different kind of technology method. But we also use a discourse analysis into a policy and media reportage to identify the structural barriers or structural factors that shaping this kind of situation or behavior. So our focus is not patchy. Our focus is more critical, that we try to argue that the incapability of the government tackling the enduring multidimensional crisis from COVID-19 pandemic as another structure of marginalizations. Yeah, so we try to use that government, the politics of pandemic is another structure of marginalizations. So let's patching the narrative. So which side that you are now, right now, the type 1, type 2, or type 3. So this is just another comic by Mise. So we find new marginals. Some new marginals, like limited protection for future medical practitioner fighting in the frontliner. So like observation by Mr. Baswara and Mbak Yuni, they interview nurses in Surabaya. The nurses, she already accepted in the hospitals, but her family did not allow her to accept the job, because there is no guarantee that she will survive with the COVID-19. So as you know that the rate of medical practitioner died by COVID-19 in Indonesia, it's very high comparing to other countries. And the second new marginals is like the incapability of National Health Security, BPJS Kesehatan, and National Employment Security, or BPJS Ketenagakerjaan, to handle the multiple crises. So as you see that BPJS Kesehatan could not cover the health problem, the financial issue for the health facilities, and also BPJS Ketenagakerjaan could not afford the economic crisis resulted by the so many new unemployment caused by the COVID-19. And also we found that there is a disruption of regional dependency economy. It's like if you are in Pamekasan, there is a farmer who are they are working on horticultural farming. And because of PSBB or the lockdown, they cannot deliver, they cannot send their harvest to big cities. So the harvest rotten in the field and cause troubles for the farmers there. And another new marginals is about stigmatization for migrants. This is also an issue that delivered yesterday and also this morning about how the stigmatization for migrants, especially for migrants, as a carrier of virus. And the last new marginal that we found that there are increasing social anxieties and distrust among the locals due to infodemic. So this is a new issue of infodemic. We are not only facing pandemics, the health crisis, but also infodemic trust crisis. So the matter with infodemic is more about a plethora of information, disinformation, misinformation distributed among about the COVID-19 in the social media, and also in our finding also in the mainstream media. So our finding is like the main source of infodemics is not only ordinary people, but public officials, artists, and other what do you call it? Artists. I forget the title, but this is popular people. So we found also old marginals. We see that surviving informal economy. So like PKL or pedagang kaki lima in Jakarta, they have to survive with the pandemic, but there is no guarantee for them to from the government to help them. So we found that indecisive government official in handling the crisis and favoring the healthy. There is an article by Makmur Kaliar from Universitas Indonesia. He wrote an article in Kompas mentioning that helping the healthy, membantu yang sehat. So this is a very regretful. And another old marginals is about privatization and commercialization of health-related facilities. Now, like tests, PCR tests, and also rapid tests, and we don't know what happened if we really found the vaccine. How the market will commercialize this new health-related facilities. We also found a widening social distancing between government with the citizens. So because the citizen distrust the government, so the gap between the government and the citizen is getting larger or widening. So we also watching and experiencing the result and growth of unequal development on screen. So this is interesting because we study on screen, or we call it screen work, or working from home, or whatever you say. But with the screen, we know that we watch and experience that there is an unequal development. There are people with good access, there are people with poor access, there are people with no access at all. Even the Minister of Education was surprised because there are some regions in Indonesia which are not electrified until now. So don't mention about internet. They don't have any electricity. So how can they learn in this technology, new technology? So this is what's happening. So we are watching and experiencing the result and growth of unequal development on screen, not on the real life. So also
Mas
we are
Anton,
learning.
5 minutes more.
Okay,
5
we are
minutes more.
learning from, yes, okay. We are learning from the lonely dying. So we are lonely dying here. Everyone is now in the anxiety of what if tomorrow, what if today, what if 2 days after tomorrow we are infected and we are dying in lonely. So the conclusion, we have never been normal. So if everybody say that there is a new normal, we haven't been normal. This is instead, in the age of COVID-19, our observation shows that marginalization not just a conditions, but also a process of distributing and accumulating vulnerability into individuals. So we call it a marginalizing process. So our suggestion is that we need to be more realistic to aware of other unseen collateral damages resulted from such a process. So this is a references that we use, and thank you very much. This is our thing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anton, for very nice presentations. It was very amazing. So I also want to remind again our participant, if you have questions, please chat. We have a chat room, so don't forget to mention to who you address your questions. Because we have very limited times, and now I want to call Mr. Alian Shah Abdurrahim, that will be delivered presentations with the title, The Role of Social Capital in Maintaining Resilience of Farmer Livelihoods Phase Flight and Drug. So, Mr. Abdurrahim, time is yours.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, for your opportunity to me for presentation my paper. I would like to present the paper with the title "The Role of Social Capital in Maintaining Resilience of Farmer Livelihood Face Floods and Drought." We are 5 author. First is me, Aliansa Abdurrahim. Second, Denny Hidayati. Third, Rufy Cahyadi. For Heri Yogaswara. And last, Mr. Sanusi. We are a researcher in Research Center for Population in Indonesian Institute of Sciences. Sorry. Our introduction, climate change, which increases the likelihood of natural events such as floods and drought, is considered as the ecological vulnerability of an area that in turn threat to the livelihoods of rural communities. The threat working by increasing the uncertainty of the already low crop yields for the farmer. To cope with the uncertainty, farmers' household develop various livelihood strategies to guarantee their mere subsistence. Livelihood strategies are carried out by combining various available livelihood assets or resources in the forms of social, natural, physical, human capital, and financial capital, whose ownership and use are strongly influenced by the socioeconomic status of household. For literature review, respond to uncertainty caused by climate change, households were implemented by utilize the social, natural, physical, human capital within their disposal. However, since the socioeconomic status limit different household use of different capital, most of the poor farmer rely more on social capital than the other form of capital. Paula 208, and then McDowell and Hess 212 state the most important type of capital relevant for the poor farmer is social capital. Hence, any intervention to safeguard them must be the formation of social institution. It is social capital. Social capital can provide lower farmer households access to various study confirm the importance of social capital in the form indigenous social institution from Agrawal to 100 Osbar et al. And social production institution for Sayogyo and also others literature. For method, our research location is in Karangmulya village in Kandang Haur sub-district in Indramayu district, West Java province in Indonesia. We use a mixed method, a quantitative and qualitative method, and also we use primary and secondary data. Qualitative approach was carried out in 210 until 214 through in-depth interview with informants, semi-structured interviews, and also FGD and participatory observation involving village communities. The quantitative approach was carried out through a household survey in 214. The survey was conducted on 80 households from 3 different social strata or social layers. Revisiting the research sites and updating quality data is done in 219 until 220. For method, we also describe about the how we divide the communities to 3 household social layer. First is upper level, second medium level, and third lower level or poor social layer. The criteria upper level is landowner at more 1.0 hectare, and medium level is our medium landowner 0.35 until 1.0 hectare, and lower level or poor people we also describe to 3 lower level for farmer without land, and also until farmer landowner but only have zero until 35 hectare. For results, for geographic and climatological context session, Karangmulya village is a rice field village which has a very high vulnerability, drought and flood present yearly. As a result, food shortage become a problem every year for most households. Historically, the village was very fertile and received year-round irrigation from the Rentang irrigation network, which began operating in 1916 in colonial era. However, since 1942, during the Japanese occupation and also the Darul Islam rebellion period, the water supply from the Rentang irrigation network no longer reached the rice field all year round. Even with the improved Rentang irrigation network and Jatiluhur irrigation network completed at the end 1967, the water no longer reaches the Karangmulya village. With the impact of climate change, which increases climate variability and the frequency and also intensity of floods and droughts, the condition of irrigation is worsened. And for results, the social layers and livelihood asset, Karangmulya village were stratified into three social layers: the upper, middle, and the bottom layer, determined by the ownership of natural capital in the form of paddy fields. However, there is interaction between all layers in the form of flows of access to asset and labor. You can see in the diagram how the every social layer household make relationship. And also for social capital have the important role in the maintaining livelihood resilience by providing access to capital, especially land for the lower layer of the community, and access to human capital, especially labor for the upper layer, which increase the capacity of the whole community livelihood assets. And the conclusion, social capital plays important role in reducing impact of floods and drought are caused by poor irrigation governance and are increasing in intensity due to the impact of climate change. Strong social capital provides access to each household to increase the capacity of other livelihood assets, natural capital, physical capital, financial capital, and human capital to maintain the resilience and sustainability of their livelihoods. Every household maintaining or even increasing the capacity of their livelihood assets by combining the livelihood asset they own and access into various forms of livelihood strategies to sustain their livelihoods. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Aliansha, for the presentations. And again, I want to remind all of the participants, if you have questions, please please write it in the chat rooms. Yeah. And then I want to know real Salma that will be delivered the presentation about does climate change matter, analyzing climate change controversy on the web and social media. Ms. Akida Nuril Salma? No? Okay. And I think the next presenters should be to Febri Yuliani, that she will present with the title Factors of Acceleration of the Community Participation in Implementation of Forest and Land Fire Preventions Policies in Siak District. So please host.
Thank you. My name is Febri Yuliani. This material I have a sense to community. Hello?
Hello, yeah. We can hear your voice clearly. Okay, please, book February.
Yes, my PowerPoint is
Oh, okay.
Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Febri Yuliani. I want to presenting about factor of acceleration of community participation in implementation of forest and land fire prevention policy in Siak district. Next. Okay, the background for the title is Riau Province has a 59 Kesatuan Hidrologi Gambut atau KHG, and then the point is Riau province is much large of burning and fire burning, land and fire burning in Indonesia. And next, the law of Kesatuan Gambut Hidrologi Gambut in Riau Province. So many difference, yeah. We call that dalam kawasan gambut and di luar kawasan gambut. That means is Kesatuan Hidrologi Gambut in Indonesia, especially Riau Province, is very large, yeah, in Indonesia. But the problem is hidrologi gambut atau land hydrology is always burn fire in Riau Province. Next. The pit or land phenomenon occurs in Riau Province negatively impact the environmental condition resulting from the management and utilizations of a pit ecosystem area are out of control and irresponsibility. For example, forest fire and land that occurred or have an impact of smoke haze that hit Riau and Sumatra region. Okay, based on the results interpretation in Siak Regency, the part of Regency in Riau Province is more burn land and fire every years happen. Next. Next, please. Literature about implementation, public policy in Indonesia. Always very nice for formulating public policy, but always make a problem with implementation. The same case in Riau Province, especially forest and land fire. Next. The method, the research type is a qualitative with explorative method, and my team, me, use a FGD for explore the result research. Next. And the result is the first, peraturan pemerintah is so many peraturan pemerintah in public policy governments is very much, but for Riau Province, especially Siak Regency, it's not a contribute to save the peatland area. Next. Peatland condition in the Siak area is next. Yeah. This map show how the land and fire in Riau Regency. Next map. Okay. The red condition, the red color is showing the forest and land fire every year. Next. Here's a hotspot in Riau province, especially Siak Regency. Okay. Okay, you can see that, and every years, always fire in pet and peatland and forest in Riau. Next. The result is communication is important role in fire prevention. Good communication makes a prevention effort can be carried out optimally and provide this optimal result. Communication it's mean here between government to society, especially the society beside the forest. Next. Interorganizational communication has been carried out as well as various things with the main material and how to control forest, land, and fire. The material include introduction of fire suppression tools, second, counseling and training, and next. Communication in control forest and land fire is carried including among the first, the delivery of information from source of information about the level of vulnerability and of an area to fire to be carried out intensive supervision by various parties. And second, communication, provincial forest and land fire control post the central communication. We call that BNPB, and the regency or city post and so on, the village level and vice versa. Next. Communication in carrying out patrol and supervision, requesting and sending information relating to forest and land fire prevention, and then requesting and send relief resources, both as human resource, equipment, and supporting resource. Giving and responding to command and request, respond and disseminate approval, and communication in the arrest of arsonists. Next. The conclusion is mitigation efforts on environmental and disaster issue can be done through the optimization of prevention for including socialization, cooperation, training, and changing oversight, coordination, competent participant, funding and facility support, political commitment, and other supporting factor. Next, please. In a local Siak Regency have a MPA, Masyarakat Peduli Api, or fire care community, so further improve internal quality with a complaint the operational system, so that community care institution atau MPA has a system and need administration. The government should be pay more attention to MPA as a given free health facilities and fees insurance in case of an incident currently working. Government in cooperation with the insurance private sector such as BPJS or motivation that become encouragement for member MPA in carrying out in that as well. And the last recommendation, dispute land restoration or program should continue to implement it according with the assessment target for all priorities area throughout Indonesia and not just pilot project. And then implementing this peatland restoration, there are certainly factors that influence, therefore the conceptualization must be clear. I think that's all my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ibu Febri, for your presentations. The last presentations, I think, informed by the committee that we will have a pre-recorded video that will be delivered by, sorry, Titin Antin et al. So the host will prepare for us. So please.
Good afternoon. My name is Titi Antin. It's indeed my pleasure to be able to participate in Symposium on Social Science 220. And today I'm going to present the responses of social system in the waste management of Indonesia, a study of cybernetic theory. Let's we saw our presentation. This paper is entitled The Responses of Social System in the Waste Management of Indonesia, a study of cybernetic theory. This research is conducted in Bantul Regency, special region of Yogyakarta, Indonesia. Bantul itself is known for its active community in waste management. In Bantul, the people established the first garbage bank or bank sampah. First, I'm going to tell you why we need to know the responses of the social system toward waste management. In Indonesia, the waste volume continues increase year by year. Most of the waste disposal in the landfill result in piles of garbage like this. Furthermore, the culture in the community has not managed the waste in environmentally friendly process. Some people even still comfortably throw garbage to river, roadside, and many other places they are not trash bins. Another research inadequate technology for waste management, and although Indonesia government has issued regulation regarding waste management, the implementation still far from expectation. Therefore, based on this phenomenon, it brings up to the question, how are the responses of the social system toward waste management? Next. This research aims to study the responses of the community social system and local government toward waste management using cybernetic theory. Cybernetic theory is one of the 7 communications traditions. Cybernetic was popularized by Norbert Wiener. The communication in the perspective of cybernetic is perceived as a link that connects the disparate parts. Cybernetic sees the problem of communication as a failure of information flow due to interference, overload of information, or incompatibility between structure and function as a source of solving communication problem. Next, in this paper, the two main concepts that will be used are feedback and the autopoietic mechanism. The feedback is based on the ability to manage information from the environment. There are cycles with a series of communication behavior that serve to reduce equivocality. In this study, the intended feedback is how the feedback given by the local government system and community system respond to the problem of waste management, which can be considered an uncertainty. While autopoietic mechanism is described in the spirit of self-reference or self-oriented. Self-reference is a key concept of the perspective of cybernetics. Next. This research uses a descriptive qualitative method by collecting data through interview, deep observation, and focus group discussion. The research was performed in Bantul Regency of Yogyakarta, special region of Indonesia. Informant in this research were the Independent Waste Management Group and the element of government, Environmental Agency of Bantul Regency or Dinas Lingkungan Hidup Kabupaten Bantul. Next result and discussion. Bantul is one of the regions in Yogyakarta, a special region. The people of Bantul has the background of Javanese culture. Community-based waste management in Bantul Regency was initiated after the earthquake event that hit Yogyakarta special region in the past 2006. The initiative of the community occurs due to the motivation to find solutions in overcoming waste issues with the capabilities owned by the community by not relying on the involvement of the government. The expression regarding to the post-earthquake condition. In this slide, the communities initiate waste management group in the form of garbage bank or bank sampah, such as Sumber Rezeki Bank Sampah, Azola Bank Sampah, and Sehat Ceria Bank Sampah. There were independent waste management group before government intervention. Forming a waste management group, namely JPSM Amor or Jejaring Pengelolaan Sampah Mandiri Amor, Anggayuh Mulyaning Jajaring Pengelolaan Sampah Mandiri Amor, which member continue to grow each year as you can. Furthermore, government respond toward waste management in Bantul involved issuing local government regulation number 15 about waste management, facilitating waste management group activities such as providing training in appropriate technology, number of trucks and waste collection vehicles. Next. The community-based independent waste management is the activity involving the participation of the community from the planning to decision-making stage and more into a bottom-up perspective as the innovation of the community in which the outcome can be realized. The government role in this context is more as facilitator in providing the facilities and infrastructure as well as the regulation to support activity. Furthermore, government response toward waste management in Bantul involve issuing local government regulation number 15 about waste management, facilitating waste management group activities such as providing training in appropriate technology, number of dustbin and waste collection. Next conclusion discussion. As they have been explained in prior, cybernetic perceives communication as a system of segments that affects each other. In the context of overcoming waste issue, lots of systems involved, such as local government, private sector, community, and other stakeholders. The point of difference in responses between both systems is affecting each other and becoming the control to acquire balance. Thus, a system can conduct transformation. Little John expressed that a system will sustain if control is available as well as to make it stable in reaching goals. The next conclusion. The community has been capable of showing their capability without the government support. They are able to rise and innovate in managing the environment through social capital, mutual cooperation, and environmental awareness to waste activities. Waste management group is a form of complexity reduction in which wastes will not be properly managed without the involvement of the community. Okay, thank you very much. And with this word, I just want to say thank you for your attention and hopefully wish you all had a good conference. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mbak Titin. I think Mbak Titin also with us today. So if presenters also address question to Mbak Titin, it's also for you can write in the chat room. And now we go to the question and answer sessions. Yeah. This is from Adinda Dewayanti. Yeah. Hi, Angita and Luis. Impressive paper and presentation. I have a question. How did you manage your data collection of these news articles? Were you considering the selections bias in the process of collections? So some suggestions addressed by Mbak Aninda Dewayanti. The first is, as you use a mayor's definition of climate refugee, you may want to do a comparative study of cities or a study of multiple cases in Canada only. Broaden your scope might help you to see the context of the discourse of environmental problems in the regions. And the second suggestion from Aninda, as you're focusing on ASEAN as a political institution and using human rights and as approach the works of AICHR and other sub-ASEAN institutions are worth to look at. They might not address climate refugee as a particular notion yet, but you may find the context and to the extent in which this organization talks about climate. Starting from there, you could narrow it down to climate refugee topic. It's a fascinating and potential topic to work on. So keep it going. Bravo. This is from Mbak Anita. So I think I will please Mbak Anggita to address this question also. Please, Mbak Anggita.
Thank you, Mr. Afi. Thank you so much for Ms. Aninda for your suggestions and for your question. So yes, on managing the data collection on this news article, we consider the selection bias in the process of collection. I believe we use data collection that underline the early cautions of climate refugee. So these critic points from environmentality and governmentality are where our perspective root from. And the making of subject and meanings itself that derive from discourse analysis become the focal point of our normative qualitative writing where we aim for the ideal situations. Well, we see that we acknowledge that the conceptual difficulties of climate refugee exist here, and this is the point where a lot of normative writings about climate migration emerge, and they focus on the type of migration, about the data of migration, whether it 100% represent the truth of the climate migration itself. But as I've mentioned, we solely focus on the environmentality and governmentality, where we seek for the ideals of the climate refugee within the ASEAN region. For your suggestion, we highly appreciate it. Yes, the first one is Meyer's definition of climate refugee. We would like to deepen our research on comparative study on cities, because Jakarta is only a city that we can take a look at, but due to also page constraints for this paper, we would like to deepen more on the next one for our research, maybe on the cities of Bangkok and more, focusing on raising sea level. And then for ASEAN as a political institution, the works of AICHR, yes, it's I think it's for our next research, we could take a look at AI, CHR, and other sub-ASEAN institutions. Here we focus on ASEAN as a regional institution because we focus on the governmentality that ASEAN can provide. And because ASEAN here, we see it from the discourse analysis that ASEAN can guide the whole region, because the power and knowledge that ASEAN has as a regional institution with its own bureaucracy, we take a look at that instead of the smaller agency like AI, CHR. Thank you so much for your suggestion, and yes, we can narrow it down for climate refugee topic in the next one.
Okay, thank you very much, Mbak Anggita. But I think another question also addressed to you from Ferdinandus Queda. The first is, what is your opinion regarding to the non-interference principle of ASEAN? That the principle is one of the cause of the lack of humanitarian assistance, the rise of migrants, climate change cooperation, and international security in the body of ASEAN. And because, as we all know, ASEAN didn't take any action regarding to the right and the safety for Myanmar refugee, Rohingya. Yeah, Rohingya, we call it Rohingya. And the third is based on the case of Rohingya, which is a basic and fundamental humanitarian right. How far did you think ASEAN will get to the point where we can assure the rights and safety of climate refugee? Overall, that is really interesting topic for us to discuss. Keep up the good work. So please, Mbak Agit.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ferdinandus, for your questions. So our opinion, our team's opinion regarding the non-interference principle of ASEAN, and relating to your second question, we believe that this very principle actually hinders more and contributing more to the bureaucratic effect on ASEAN because of the non-interference principle. It's harder to push for certain agendas because, as we mentioned on our paper, for example, on haze problem, the problem becomes iterated as an environmental issue and push further from a lot of actors. Therefore, ASEAN as an institution needs to take a certain type of framework for that. However, for climate refugee, for example, where refugee, even the traditional meanings of refugee itself cannot be handled collectively by ASEAN, the non-interference principle in relating to climate refugee, it will hinder more for ASEANs to progress towards a clearer framework, and we acknowledge that. Yes, so to answer your second question, yes, that principle can be the cause of the lack of humanitarian assistance, primarily when we talk about climate refugee and refugees in general. And then for Rohingya, based on the case of Rohingya, which is a basic and fundamental humanitarian rights, how far did you think ASEAN will get to the point where we can assure the rights and safety of climate refugee? This was actually one of the root problem on where the bureaucracy of ASEAN and also the identity that ASEAN wants to uphold, it's all very intertwined with the interference and also the agendas that our representations in ASEAN bring upon. Because when we talk about Rohingya, we could not even push an agenda where we collectively aim to truly tackle the problem on that humanitarian issue. And then for the climate refugee, Rohingya itself can, a part of Rohingya actually are becoming the climate refugees. So what we think here on this Rohingya case, it's not, if ASEAN does not take a push towards this climate refugee issue as a discourse, we cannot go that far in handling whether climate refugee or the refugee issues in general. So yes, that is why we aim for the governmentality and environmentality perspective on seeing this issue, because we aim for the ideals where ASEAN nations actually keep each other accountable and upholding their human rights. So I think that's all from us. Thank you so much for your questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mbak Anggita, for your response. And I have another question to Mr. Anton, that you already mentioned about that COVID-19 is not a kind of the disaster, but you use the term of vulnerability adapted by the term of the disaster itself. Can you a little bit mention about that? In other part, you mentioned that COVID-19 is a kind of the disaster, but you use the definition of vulnerability in your research adapted by the term that usually used in the disaster reductions. Can you get it?
I missed the first part about the second part. I got it.
Yeah. The question is,
The first
you mentioned it in your presentations before that COVID-19 is not a disaster. Yeah, is not disaster at all. So it's a little bit confused for us.
Okay, I get it. I got the idea. Yeah. Okay, and the second is more about the disaster reduction. Okay, I will try to answer the first one. I didn't get it the second one because, okay, in our opinion, in our argument that we are perceiving that the COVID-19 is a hazard. Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry if I did not like. It's like a volcano. A volcanic eruption. Volcanic eruption is a natural hazard, right? Like a TBC is a national. It's a health hazard, or HIV/AIDS. It's also a health diseases. So COVID-19 is a disease. Yeah, this became a hazard when it meets with vulnerable structures like the health structures, like the political structures, like the social structures, like the media, and also other infrastructures. So the COVID-19, the disease, will not be a disaster for those who have a good health infrastructures. But the problem is that now Indonesia, in Indonesia in particular, we see that the health infrastructure in Indonesia is very poor. It's very weak because when the COVID-19, the disease struck the society or the populations, there are lack of good health infrastructure or health system or health security that can support this kind of disease. This is to answer the first question. So it's like a volcanic eruption. If you are ready, if you're well prepared, if you're prepared enough, this will not become a disaster for some people, right? So this is why that's why we in our first slide I am presenting that we are survivors of the COVID-19. So because of what? Because we who are still alive today have a good infrastructures. You have a good health facility, you have a good job, you have a good system, security system, so you are not becoming the victims of COVID-19. So I would say like that to address the first questions. And the second one is about
the second one about the definition of vulnerability. You adapted from disaster reductions terminology. Could you please more detail explain about on this on your research what the main point from the definition of vulnerability that we want to address.
Okay, I got it. So in disaster research, in the 60s or in the early of the this century, last century, like in the 1940, 1950, we are still using an adaptation approach. So when we talk about adaptation, it's more like a human capability to adapt with a huge disruption, environmental hazards. So in those years, we still volcanic eruption, it's seen as a disaster, right? So, but in the 70s or in the 90s, 70s until the 90s until now, we are turning to the vulnerability. So volcanic eruption or diseases or earthquakes is a hazard. It will not become a disaster if we can manage the structure which are vulnerable. So we have to strengthen the vulnerability, our structure, so that it will not vulnerable when a sudden attack or a sudden hazard strike, something like that. So this is a different. But now in this new millennium, so starting in the 21st century, we are more aware of the discourse of resiliency. So we are not escaping from the hazard, but we are living with the hazard. This is something that very new, that we are still thinking to elaborate more, to do more research on that, because to some extent, like we mentioned earlier, that to respond the disease, we invented a vaccine, but we never know the side effect of the vaccines or the medicines. So our effort to reduce our vulnerability has becoming the source of a new vulnerability. So we have to be resilient on that. So this is my explanation. So I hope this can explain to the.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mas Anton, for your answer. And I think another question is addressed to Pa Alianisha, since Pa Aliansha told about the social capital in maintaining resilience of farmer, and also you mentioned about the roles of in the traditional coastal traditional institution, yeah, traditional institution, just like indigenous institutions. Do you think, yeah, based on your experience from your research, your study, do you think the traditional institutions, just like indigenous institution, is still applicable in the current situation, especially when we talk about the climate change? In Aceh, we also face the similar situations that our farmer has their own knowledge on how they try to adapt with the changes, the changing of the environmental. But since the climate change affected the local community, their knowledge not yet applicable accurately if compared before. So what do you think about these situations?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Alfi. From our experience and also our data in our research in Karangmulya village, I think the traditional institution is still effective, yeah, because like Bawon, also Ceblokan and Remi, the like poor people, especially the woman or woman of head household, can still access the land, and also the social capital not only make relationship in agriculture but also spare to other social aspect, like in how they can change the natural resources for increase their access to financial asset. Like if the poor people need money for their school, the poor households can borrow the money to the rich household, and vice versa. If the like rich people need labor to maybe family hajatan, the rich people can ask to poor people to afford help there like that. So I think in the casus, because the village is the like they every year have to make the like collaborate for maintenance on the agriculture activities. I think the social capital is still effective. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pak Ali Ansha. And I think this is a kind of suggestion from Mbak Anggita, if presenters can ask questions directly. But I think, I don't know, the host, yeah. But anyway, the next question is addressed to Ibu Febri, that Ibu Febri already presented about the factors of acceleration of community participation, implementation of forest and land fire preventions. As we know, this is one of the main problems of countries, especially when we also countries just like around ASEAN is one of the big problem of us. And do you think the community participation is really effective in implementation or reduce the number of fire in Indonesian area, especially in Siak? Since we also know that many plantations, palm plantations for industry. So this also the significant factors has been contributed for this problem. So what do you think? So February, please.
Thank you for your question. I think it's in community is a very important thing to make unity in community, like masyarakat peduli api, because they are the ground level is know about the problem, yeah, and companies in palm industry, of course they are make up so many problem, yeah, like burning fire. But I think if the institution of community is a very high, very important things, yeah, because the community can increase to make a participation in a society, yeah, and company make a responsibility to make a masyarakat peduli api in facilities. I think in Siak Regency in Riau province, the have the biggest company in Asia. You know that April company make a pulp and paper, or then the others in so many palm industries in there. So the company is make social responsibility, and the community must be increase the participation, because they are the first know about the location. There's know about the environmental. I think like that.
Okay, thank you, both Febri. And I think it is possible also if we give the opportunity for all the participants to raise their voice if they want to ask. But I think the technicals will be managed by the host. So I think it will be better if someone who want to address questions, yeah, deliver their questions, please open the camera and then raise your hand, and then maybe the host will open the mic. Anybody want to ask directly? So I think the host can give us an opportunity to deliver questions. So please, or maybe between the presenters, if you want to address a question to another one. Maybe just like Mbak Anggita, if you have another question to another presenter, that's also possible.
Can I ask a question for Mr.
Yes.
Aliansyah?
Yeah, please.
Sure.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Aliansyah, for your presentation. Okay, so you have mentioned that social capital is important in maintaining the resilience and livelihoods, and that between social layers, the interactions exist. I have read about social networking of villages from economics perspective. It is a book from a Stanford professor called The Human Network by Matthew O. Jackson, that if interactions are only conducted minimally between layers in villages, then the disparity will remain because they only interact within their own layers. And how do you analyze such interaction between layers for agriculture? Do the interactions, do more interaction actually create better ones towards the livelihoods on agriculture? Thank you.
Okay. Thank
Please,
you.
Pak Ali.
Thank you, Ms. Anggita. In the village, the communities make the differentiation of social layer from the land, from the area of land. So like the middle social layers can access to the rich land with like sewa or gadai, like that. And also the poor people, I think they didn't have like money for rent the land. They still can access to land with Bawon. Bawon is the social production institution. It is the traditional or indigenous institution. So I think so the local people can make their livelihood is still resilience, like that. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anything that you want to confirm, Mbak Anggita? Okay,
Thank you.
that's thank you very much, Pak Ali. And please, if another participant or presenters want to deliver questions, please raise hand. Because we still have enough times. Mas Anton? Enough? Okay. Yeah. Okay. I think that's enough for all of our sessions for today. Thank you very much for all of your participations in our very important event for today. And thank you very much for all presenters. Give big applause for all presenters. And I think I have no mega conclusions because most all of the presentations was very interesting. Basis the interactions between environmental and social issues, and also disaster, and also some cases on how our communicate with the environment. This one of the very interesting addressed by Mbak Titin, yeah, Mbak Titin, yeah, tadi. Okay, thank you very much. And then now we want to take a picture together. So please open the camera for all the participants. So this is a kind of request from the committee before we end of this session. please open the camera so we can take a photo sessions. By Hermin, Prof. Hermin. Is there anything from Prof. Hermin? I don't know. Hello. Okay, please open the camera. We have Prof. Hermin here. Is there anything that you want to deliver, Prof. Hermin? No. Oh, we can hear. Okay, please open the camera and now, and then please shake your hand. 1, 2, 3. Once more, 1, 2, 3, cheese. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for all the presenters and also participants for your participation in this very important event for us, and hope to see you again in the next 2 years, I think. Yeah, I mean, good congratulations for all the committee for very successful events for today. I'm Alfie Rahman. Thank you very much, and forgive me if I made a mistake during moderated this session. Okay, bye-bye, and I will hand over this to the host. Bye-bye.